Hello, good evening. Gary Edward Kettle, psychologist, psychotherapist, here in my office in Lausanne. A nice evening. It is Tuesday, the 10th of June, 2025, and I'm in pain, suffering. Yeah, I yesterday was a day off, and I tried to move a lot of heavy stuff that maybe I shouldn't have tried alone. And I'm having a bit of a bad back today. So if you see me suddenly for these weird faces, like sorry for that for you, but it's because I have a big twinge in my back. So today I'm going to talk about codependency, a very, very important subject from both sides. So that's something that whatever you feel you might be in that, we will talk about that. As I'm also doing the 70-day challenge, I always talk a little bit about my day and say how things have been. So Tuesday is a normal working day from 9 o'clock onwards. And so that's what I did. And up to 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, I went and even with the bad back, did a little bit of gym, reasonably soft, so not to do too much more damage, but a bit of stretching and generally the usual stuff, but without pushing myself. So there was that. I had a coffee, and then here I am now here with you, and so that's it. So codependency. We're all codependent. We're all interdependent. We're all codependent. That's quite normal. That's the way we live. I do this, you do that, we do the other, and everything flows because that is the way that life is. And even in normal relationships, sometimes you have the roles which are fairly clearly separated. If you look back on some of the sitcoms of especially America in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even you see there's very much this separation of the husband that goes out to work and earns the money and deals with the car and deals with the bills and the finances, and the wife stays at home and looks after the home and looks after the kids and looks after the social side of life. And in many societies, some societies it's inversed. In certain African societies, it's the women that go out to work and the men that sort of hang around and do other things. So it's not fixed as in one gender does this, one gender does the other. Although, especially in America, even in Switzerland, which is a little bit behind the times with certain advances, we make clocks, but some of the clock run a bit slowly, and so we have generally a separation, and this happens naturally in many relationships, both professional and intimate, where you get one person that tends to have one type of role and the other one has another type of role, and those roles are separate. But what is dysfunctional, or what I call codependent relationships, because other people use the term in a slightly different way, is that when you have one person, and it's often a man, but it's certainly not always a man. I have patients where it's different, where you have one person that's very competent with the outside world, working, administration, and all those sort of good things you do, and the other person is not competent for whatever reason. There could be somebody that has an obvious handicap, so they need someone to sort of look after them. So that happens. But in these dysfunctional relationships, what we happen to find is that someone that is fairly competent in things or very fairly independent to begin with, once they get in these relationships, they lose their competencies. They become more and more dependent. And this is where these things dysfunction. It's where the person, what I consider codependent, the person that has problems in normal relationship functioning, finds someone that has problems in daily functioning, in functioning at the outside of the couple. and they get together, and the person that needs to look after someone else, because that's the way that they function in relationship, finds someone they can look after. And then unconsciously, because I'll explain why I'm convinced it's unconscious, they do more and more things to create more and more dependency. So the other gets to a point where they cannot leave. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of or seen the film Boxing Helena, which I'm not capable to watch. Just the idea drives me horrible, makes me feel awful. Is where there was the story of a surgeon that cut the arms and legs off his wife so she couldn't leave and he could look after her. Sounds awful, but that's the, if you like, the ultimate extreme image of a codependent relationship. There's one that's slightly less bad, which is, I think, a Stephen King story, which was made into a film with Donald Sutherland and Kathy Bates called Misery, in which he was a famous author. He was driving in, I think, in Canada somewhere. He had an accident. He was found by a nurse, Kathy Bates, took him back to her house. Big fan of his. Loved the idea that it was there and maybe she could help him and support him writing, and he would stay with her. And as he started to get better and he started to talk about leaving, what did she do? She broke both his legs. So he would stay dependent. Now, these are horror stories, these are extreme, these are exaggerated. These show clearly the dysfunction of the codependent partner, and that you can see that they're evil and they're bad. And their intentions, although they say things, I want to look after this person, what they're doing is obviously and very clearly to destroy the other person so they cannot leave. Now, unfortunately, that is not so rare in the real world. It doesn't work like that. It's not people cutting things off or breaking legs. It doesn't work like that. But on an emotional level, and even on a practical level, these people, because they want to have someone to look after and because they have problems in relationship functioning, is when they find someone that's a bit fragile, that is looking for a bit of support, and they come and they offer them all this wonderful care and support, the other person gets drawn in. And then, without realizing it, they become more and more dependent, more and more fragilized by the functioning or dysfunctioning of the partner. One of these they're not these perverse. I can't remember what it's called now. Narcissistic perverse. It's not the same functioning. It's not the same dysfunctioning. The fact that those sort of people succeed to get people to cut themselves off from their other relationships, it's not quite the same thing, although it has the same, it ends up more or less the same way. The person is more and more dependent and they can't get out. But there's something, the codependent is not perverse. The codependent, when I first started to follow dependent people, alcoholics and people with other difficulties, and I have a patient actually now in therapy, and she's dependent and she having problems to get out of a relationship. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later if I have the time. But when I started to follow dependent people, and I realized what a codependent person was doing, which fragilized them even more than they already were, then I started to get very angry. How dare this person damage the other? It must be a devil. And this sort of pervert, narcissistic pervert. I was thinking in those terms until I started to meet them. I started to meet these codependent partners. And I had one who came into therapy. He realized that there was something wrong in his functioning, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He couldn't quite understand what was going wrong. But somewhere it was obvious to him that something wasn't working the way it should. He had a alcoholic wife, and every day coming home from work, he would pop into an off license and buy 2 bottles of wine every night for his alcoholic wife. And I said, do you not realize that you are reinforcing her alcoholism every day? And he looked at me with big eyes and said, Mr. Gettle, what else can I do? I said, what do you mean, what else can you do? She's suffering. If she cannot have a drink at night, she can't sleep. She feels bad all over. She's in pain. And she complains how unwell she is. And I can't cope with that. I cannot cope to see my wife suffer. So I buy her wine. He says, but do you not realize that she is going down a slope to get more and more alcoholic, and at some point her body's going to fall to pieces because of that? He says, I can't help myself. I said, well, we'll need to work on that. And what I found was that he and all the codependents are the most generous and guilt-ridden people I have ever met. And that is how they come to be in these codependent relationships, because the person who is dependent wants someone that's generous and that will support them in their addiction or in their weakness. And they get this sort of unholy matrimony, or the folie à deux, craziness between the two of them, because one of them needs someone to support their dependence and their weakness, and the other one is incapable to do otherwise. So that's how it comes about. But in that dynamic, what you actually find is that the person codependent reinforces the dependency. That person becomes more and more dependent, and the other person, if they have the capacity to realize the damage that they're doing, and some of them do and most of them don't, then they need to withdraw, they need to step back. And that is what I succeeded with this guy after about 5-6 months of therapy. He said, I realize how much damage I am doing, but I cannot be in contact with her and listen to her complain how much she's in pain, how much she's suffering. I can't do that. I said, so what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to separate from her. I'm going to divorce her. Because I realize now, thanks to the therapy, that I'm doing her harm, and I don't want to do her any more harm. But I cannot cope with the reaction when I stop doing what I'm doing. So I'm leaving her. So I thought, oh, well, that's sorted. That's a good therapy. Until I found out afterwards that he had an adult daughter. And this adult daughter was anguished. And she was so anguished, she couldn't go to work. So what he'd done, he'd organized a flat for her, an apartment for her, which he paid for. He was paying for an apartment. He was paying a certain amount of money for her to live. He was supporting her financially, totally. I said, but she's an adult. She could go to unemployment. She could get help. She gets some support. Oh, she's too anguished. She can't leave the house. She's too unwell. And I thought, here we go again. He's let go of his wife, and now he has a dependent daughter that cannot work. And she's not motivated to do anything because he has supported her too much. And in America, they call that enabling. And I agree with that as a term. And the image that I give, because they don't do anything actually wrong, they enable, they support. And it reminds me of the game of curling. I don't know if you understand what curling is. Curling is when you have a puck or a stone, or whatever you want to call it, and you throw it across the ice towards some circles, which is the goal of what you're seeking. And you have people that go in front of that puck, rock, whatever you want to call it, and they brush the ice. And they brush the ice in such a way is that it removes the friction. And by removing the friction, it goes much, much further. Now, if you imagine that you had a slope and you throw something down the slope and you removed all the friction, that would just keep going indefinitely. It might even gain speed. And that's the problem with enablers, that they support the problem to the point that the problem gains speed, gains momentum, becomes worse. But they're not bad people. Now, something rather interesting is that when I thought to do this thing tonight, what I usually do, I go on ChatGPT and ask them to write the description for me because it's specific how you're supposed to write it, and I'm working full time, so to come up with the idea, to create the image for the thumbnail, and to write the description every day is a lot. So I give the ChatGPT a few ideas of what I want to talk about, and it completes it. And what it did today, it mentioned also work, profession. How can this be a professional OC problem? And it's only when I don't know if you know, but I do this twice. I do it first half an hour in French, and then I do it half an hour in English. So while I was doing the French version just before, as I was talking about this could exist in a professional environment, it suddenly occurred to me that I had this experience myself personally. Yeah, because as I was talking about, you find an employer that generously, and generously is not wrong, finds a space for someone that has a problem finding a job. And the person is dependent on the employer to keep the job because they don't feel they can get a job anywhere else for whatever reasons. And the employer is generous with them, but also at the same time abuses them and profits from them. Suddenly realized that I've had exactly that experience. When I was in my last year of studies in psychology here, I met a wonderful psychiatrist, Dr. Gerard Salem, who was brilliant as a psychiatrist, brilliant as a teacher in systemics, and he was also the teacher and the person that first put together courses of hypnosis in Lausanne. And I met him, and well, that's very complicated. Don't waste our time here with that. It's a great story. I'll tell it you maybe another time. And so I started training in hypnosis with his course of hypnosis. And to do that, in principle, he only dealt with professionals that already were working. And because I was still a student, I had nowhere to practice hypnosis with real patients. And he very generously offered me a space in his practice to see one or two patients to do hypnosis. And while I was there, I found out from university that if I did a 6 month work experience with him, that would count for a credit, generally for my degree. So I asked him if he had how he felt about that, and he said, "Sure, if you want to come and work for nothing." Um, and in turn, he would find me a space and he would let me work. He was generous. I was learning, I was getting experience, and there was nowhere else that I could get that. So really had me in a position of dependency. What happened was that he allowed me to see his patients and to take more and more patients. And then he billed in his own name. So for a year, because I extended the 6 months to a full year, because I had a slightly light last year at university because I'd done university before, so I had some equivalencies. And so I worked for him for one whole year as an intern for no wages. And he would bill 200 francs for every session. He's dead now, so it's too late for the insurances. You can't catch him back. And he paid me nothing. And then after I got my degree, I still couldn't find anything. So he very generously allowed me to stay, to have work experience while I was doing my master's. And for about 4 or 5 months, he still paid me nothing. Eventually, we had a row, and he agreed to give me 60 francs per session, which was pretty much nothing compared to the fact he was taking 200 francs per session. But it was much better than nothing. But it just showed how much I was dependent on him, how much I needed him. And he liked me to some degree. That's why he gave me the space. But he also abused me. And this is the confusion that we have with codependency, because the person dependent benefits from the structure, from the support, from the help that they get from the codependent person. The codependent person, on one level, is being kind and generous and thoughtful and helpful, but they need the other person to stay dependent so they can't leave because they're petrified of being alone, and they know how difficult it is for them to find partners because on the social level they're handicapped. And so that is where we find ourselves. We have dependent people that unfortunately become more and more dependent because either they have addictions and the other person supports their addictions and become more addicted, they become weaker, or you are a codependent person and you are trying to be as kind and generous as possible to someone, and somewhere you realize that you make them more fragile, that you're making them weaker, that what you're doing is not love. Even though it might seem like it, even though you honestly don't wish for the other to suffer, it doesn't mean that what you're doing is good for them. So if you're a dependent person, and that's more than likely something that existed before you were in this relationship, you need to take a step back and say, is this relationship helping me to become more complete as a human being? Is it helping me to be independent? You can be independent and in a relationship. You can be yourself, you can be powerful, you can be capable, and still be in a relationship. Being in a relationship doesn't mean that you're incapable. It doesn't mean that you need to be looked after. That's an unhealthy relationship. I'm not saying that you can't be in a relationship where you're supportive and you're looking after other things. We have quite a lot of situations now that we have men that look after the house and look after the families. That's fine if it functions like that. If each one has the respect, has a certain power, has a certain availability to do what they need to do to make themselves feel whole and useful and capable. But if you're finding that the relationship is not doing that for you, and you're feeling weaker and more helpless and more dependent, then that's a warning sign that something is dysfunctioning in your couple, in your family, and you need to look at it. Because if you don't, there's no reason why it'll get better. There's lots of reasons why it can get worse. So if that is your situation, if you can, try and find professional therapists. If you have friends, if you have family, if there are other people that can help you, talk to them and ask them how you can get out of this situation, how you can be more powerful, more independent, and more successful as a person, and less weakened by this dependency. On the other hand, if you find after what I've just said, that you are actually in the role of a codependent person. That although in your consciousness, in your awareness, you are helping and supporting someone that's weak, that's fragile, that's handicapped in some way. And that's what you want to do, you want to help them. If when you take that step back, when you look critically what is happening to your partner, and you realize that they're becoming more and more dependent, more and more weak, more and more helpless, please take a moment, take a breath, and say, what I am doing, although it might be with the best intentions. They say the best intentions are the path to hell. And what was that? The road to hell is paved by good intentions. That's it. That's the phrase. And if you are taking your partner to hell with your good intentions, please realize that you're not doing the best for them. And there must be other ways. Maybe they need therapists, maybe they help them need support. But what they don't need is whatever it is you're doing. Although it might be painful for you to stop giving them what they keep asking for. I had a patient yesterday, not yesterday, last week. That's last week. Today was Monday. I didn't work Monday. Last Friday. It was yesterday because it was the last day of work. And he was saying, "Oh, but yeah, I need this and I need that and I need the other." And I thought, this is rubbish. You feel weak. You feel helpless. You feel you need to ask your partner for more and more things. And they give that to you because you keep minging and complaining all the time. And say you're going to lose your couple, you're going to lose your family because you're so weak, you're so helpless. You need to realize that what you're saying and what you're doing is destructive. So I'm not saying that if you are in this codependent functioning or dysfunctioning, that you are at fault, that you're a bad person. The other person who is dependent could be constantly asking you to give them what they feel they need, which is harmful to them. And that's difficult because they say, I need this, I need that. This patient is taking masses of prescribed medication. How he's come to have so much prescribed medication is because his doctor has reinforced his dependency. The doctor, without realizing it, has taken the role of a codependent to give the person what they ask for, which is exactly what they don't need, which is exactly what makes them worse. And I haven't yet confronted this guy's doctor to tell him that he should ignore all this minging and complaining and I can't cope and I'm going to die unless you give me all this medication, because I hadn't thought about it until last week. And now I'm talking to you, I'm realizing there is absolutely essential that I talk to this doctor because this doctor has become codependent. This doctor has entered into a dysfunctional relationship field. And maybe you have entered into this without realizing how much damage you are doing by responding to all these desires, wants. Please help me, please give me this. The patient that says that his wife would complain and minge and not sleep and be in pain and suffering. We didn't bring her 2 bottles of wine every night. He wasn't trying to destroy her, and he didn't realize that. It took a while before he had realized somewhere that it was wrong, but he hadn't quite realized just how wrong it was until we gone through this process. And then when you sort of really hit home, he says, I can't continue with this, but I can't cope with her complaining. And if you are in this situation as a codependent, if you're doing harm to your partner, you need to find a way to stop. Because if badness happens and your partner gets worse and worse, somewhere you're going to realize that you're the root of this, that you have a responsibility to stop giving what they ask for and start to find out what they need. Bit of a tough discussion tonight. So anyway, that's where we're at. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. If you come late, there's always copies of this on YouTube, so you can catch up and see what you've missed. If you found this useful, please like, please subscribe, please share with other people. Let them know that I'm here Sunday night for a guided meditation hypnosis, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night for subjects like this one, which hopefully you'll find interesting and hopefully even helpful. And on Saturday in the afternoon at 4:30 p.m. CEST, Central European Summer Time, have another subject. Usually it's a subject that's even more important, I feel that really is something that's worth to share on a Saturday. It's worthwhile for a Saturday. So okay, that's me for tonight. Thank you for your attention, and maybe I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.